Here's our next artist. This is Jacques-Louis David, and this is his self-portrait. You mean David? No, he's French. Let's read it with a French accent. David. And in this self-portrait, he is presenting a very clear understanding of himself. Now, we've looked at some self-portraits of artists before, and you know how to read them now, right? So let's look at what he's wearing. What he's wearing is that heavy artist smock that I keep telling you about, and very rarely do we see because artists are always putting themselves in these, fancy costumes. So rather than the elaborate frills of a jacket and collar, he's showing himself in his working shirt with this, well, it's a very fine working shirt. It's gorgeous knot, but with his artist smock. He's in the act of painting, and he's looking out at us as if he's painting us. What kind of a look does he give us? Because that's the kind of man he is, right? Now, I will tell you that this heavy shadow over the right side of his face is because as a young man, he was in a fencing accident. Fencing, like with the foils, like, yeah, with the swords clashing and those thin, long swords. So those are called foils. And it was an accident where his opponent's foil like nicked him on the side of the face, and it didn't heal correctly, and it kind of developed a tumor. So it was a little disfiguring on his face. So he's giving it a heavy shadow to minimize his facial disfigurement. But beyond that, what do we see? Now, if we were in class together, I ask you, if he was in this room, what kind of a man is he? Intelligent, okay. Serious? Aggressive? Yeah, there's like a furrow in those brows. Sure. Observant. There's a sharpness in those eyes, like he's not letting anything past him. He's a very serious figure. In fact, when we pull out, let's look at the color palette. It's very subdued, it's very controlled. He was trained by Fragonard in the Rococo, and he hated the Rococo style. He hated all the debauchery and the artificialness of Rococo, and he, in this painting, has removed all of that. None of the frills, none of the arabesque lines, none of the elaborate incrustication. And instead, he presents this very clear, uh, um, direct, honest painting. And this is very typical of the neoclassical style. In fact, Jacques-Louis David is going to help establish the neoclassical style, and his teaching, his students that he teaches are going to also take on this neoclassicism, and then it's all going to morph together as the French government and power also starts to morph. So he is a pivotal figure in the neoclassical, and he and his students will be influential to the development in style of art in Europe through the next decade. Wow, I know. A typical portrait. His commissions beyond his self-portrait. His commissions were for the wealthy and the aristocracy of France. This is my favorite. This is Jacques-Louis David's Monsieur Lavoisier and his wife. Oh. Now, Monsieur Lavoisier was an aristocrat, but he was also a highly educated scientist and tax collector, which allowed for him to pursue his experiments. Because he was a tax collector, he had enough money, because of the French corruption, to serve the upper classes. He had enough money and education to pursue his experiments in chemistry. In fact, Lavoisier is referred to as the father of modern chemistry. He and what is not talked about, his wife, her name is Marie Anne. Marie Anne was also a chemist, And she worked one-on-one with her husband as his partner and his laboratory assistant. And together they accomplished discoveries in chemistry, including the identification and naming of oxygen and hydrogen. What? Now, remember, we talked about this with the Enlightenment period. What's the big deal with oxygen, understanding it? Once you understand oxygen and hydrogen, then you can understand things like combustion engines. So they identified and they named hydrogen and oxygen. In fact, them with a few of their fellow chemists established the first periodic table. So the thing that you always hated in chemistry, the thing you had to memorize, that you can blame on Monsieur Lavoisier and Marie Anne. Now, here in this portrait, we see the beautiful connection between husband and wife. Here, this is the detail I like. Look at this. Oh. We can see the beautiful connection between husband and wife and what they each brought to the roles in their, what their roles were in their developments in chemistry. So here we have the equipment, and he's perhaps writing some experiment notes. And then in the background, we have a drawing horse and a drawing board, because Marie Anne was the one who would draw out their plans for their experiments and their equipment, and then they would do it together. And then what you can see here is, what is he doing? He's writing their findings, and she's very lovingly draped over his shoulder reading the lecture note, or the lab notes, and he's looking up at her like, babe, did I get it right? Did I get it right? In fact, she learned English to translate their findings into foreign text. So here we see this gorgeous partnership between the two of them. How is this considered neoclassical? Well, if we look at the larger composition, we have their experimentation, we have the drawing board, and then we have 1, 2, 3 fluted square pilasters. Pilasters are pillars that are attached to the wall. And we understand columns or pillars in terms of iconography to be symbols of civilizations. Now, these are not broken pillars, so they are not broken civilizations. So instead, we need to think of these as pillars of strength, pillars of society, pillars of civilization. And there's 3 of them. 1 in front of the drawing board, 1 in front of the chemistry experiments, and 1 in front of the couple. So what Jacques-Louis David is doing here is he's making a statement of their influence, their power, their contribution to the greater good of man, of society, of civilization, of France, with them as being these 3 strong pillars. Isn't that lovely? So we're going back to this self-portrait of Jacques-Louis David. What we have is a man who is without the fuss and pomp and ridiculousness of the Rococo period. To further his understanding of the neoclassical, he got the, as a student at the École des Beaux-Arts, he got the fellowship, the exclusive fellowship called the Prix de Rome, the Prize of Rome. It's a fellowship, think of it like a scholarship with room and board. It's a chance for the top graduating student, which he was his year, to live in Rome. And the idea would be to expose yourself to the classical world, the ruins in Rome, to make sketches and understandings and measurements, and then come back to France and then bring that with you. So he did. He did a great job with it too. Another thing, because I love Monsieur Lavoisier and his wife, guess what? You can see it. It's at the Met. The Metropolitan Museum of Art owns it. So go to New York City. There's so much to see there. Before you go, email me and I can send you a list of all of the spaces, all the places to go and see. But when you get to the Met, I mean, basically you need like 3 days. I know, it seems like an exaggeration, but you'll understand when you get there. It has everything, or It has a lot of what we look at in this class. And they have Monsieur Lavoisier and his wife. So go and take a selfie and send it to me. This is my student, Josh, and he sent this to me, and I love it. It's so great. I love this painting.